outskirts of Joplin, Missouri, hidden in the shadows of winding hills and whispering trees, there lies a road with a name that sends shivers down every spine that dares to hear it. The locals call it the Devil's Promenade or the Devil's Road, a cursed path where, on certain dark nights, a ghostly, glowing orb known as the Spook Light appears out of nowhere, floating silently through the trees. It's a phenomenon that has haunted this place for generations. Some say it's the spirit of a soul tormented by a tragic fate, while others whisper that it's a manifestation of ancient evil, an entity lurking in the woods since time immemorial. Jacob, a young archaeology student who didn't know better, heard the story. With a heart full of curiosity and a hint of arrogance, he decided to investigate with his girlfriend Sarah, who shared his interest in all things supernatural. They waited for a night when the moon would be full, believing it would help them spot this infamous light. That night, they set off, their car laden with flashlights, a camera, and an audio recorder, believing themselves to be prepared for anything. But in their eagerness, they had overlooked one critical detail. No one ever returns the same from the Devil's Promenade. As they reached the road, something seemed to shift in the air around them. The road that had looked normal at first now felt unnervingly strange, almost alive. The air grew heavier, thick with a chill that crept over their skin. Only the faintest rustling of wind disturbed the silence. Tall, ancient trees lined the road, their branches stretching out like skeletal fingers, poised to ensnare anyone foolish enough to pass beneath them. Despite the tightening knot of fear in their chests, they pressed on, stepping onto that cursed path. After walking for a few minutes in the dense darkness, they saw it, a faint glow flickering in the distance. At first, it seemed weak, like a candle flickering in a storm, but then it grew brighter, closer, more vibrant. It was a small, fiery orb hovering in the air, swaying gently as if calling them closer. Mesmerized, Jacob and Sarah followed, every step pulling them deeper into the unknown. But the farther they walked, the more something seemed terribly wrong. The light was leading them away from the main road, drawing them into the forest's heart. Shadows deepened, swallowing the last traces of moonlight, and an icy cold enveloped them. Sarah's breath grew shallow, and she urged Jacob to turn back, to leave this place before it was too late. But Jacob couldn't hear her anymore. His eyes were locked on the glowing orb, like a moth drawn into a flame. Then, without warning, the light vanished, plunging them into suffocating darkness. In the silence that followed, the realization dawned. They were utterly, horrifyingly alone. Jacob flicked on his flashlight, but the beam only revealed twisted tree trunks and gnarled roots, shadows dancing at the edge of their vision. Panic seized them as they realized they couldn't find the way back. And then it started. Faint whispers echoed around them, words they couldn't quite make out, voices that seemed to come from all directions, yet from nowhere at all. Sarah clutched Jacob's hand, her nails digging into his skin as her fear spiraled. They turned, trying to retrace their steps, but all they heard were footsteps, heavier and heavier, following close behind them, though nothing was there. Suddenly, the darkness shifted, and a figure appeared, a shadowy shape with eyes that burned like embers in a dying fire. It drifted closer, wearing a twisted, malevolent grin, its gaze locked onto theirs. Jacob raised his flashlight to ward it off, but it only brought the creature's features into sharper focus. Its face was pallid, almost corpse-like, and its eyes held a hatred that seared into their souls. A strange hissing noise escaped its mouth, as though chanting some dark, ancient curse. Jacob pulled Sarah and tried to run, but the forest seemed to close in around them, the trees growing denser, the shadows lengthening, blocking every path. Sarah stumbled, and as Jacob bent to help her, he felt her hand turn cold, so cold it felt like touching death itself. Her eyes grew vacant, her face ashen, and her lips parted in a silent scream as the life seemed to drain from her. Then Jacob heard a voice, a rasping whisper that slid into his ear like a blade. "You're mine now," it said, dripping with malice. Jacob turned, heart pounding, to see a woman in a torn, blood-soaked dress. Her face was bruised and battered, her eyes blackened and hollow, with rivulets of blood trickling down her cheeks. Her hand reached out toward Jacob, skeletal fingers curling as though to drag him into eternal darkness. In blind terror, Jacob bolted, leaving Sarah's lifeless form behind. He ran, branches slashing his face, the forest pressing in on him. But no matter how fast he ran, he could feel the figure behind him, drawing closer with each step, each heartbeat. The next morning, Jacob's car was found parked at the edge of the Devil's Promenade. But of Jacob and Sarah, there was no trace. All that remained was their camera lying on the ground, cold and silent. Inside, there were a few photos showing the spook light in the distance, a ghostly orb flickering in the darkness, and the final shot, a horrifying close-up of a woman's pale, blood-streaked face with soulless black eyes, grinning directly at the camera. To this day, no one knows what truly happened to Jacob and Sarah. Locals believe they were taken, claimed by the malevolent spirit haunting the road, just 2 more victims in an endless line. And still, every night, that same glowing orb appears, luring new souls to the Devil's Promenade, each step taking them deeper into darkness, to the same tragic fate that awaits all who venture too close.